Today, I would like to talk about expert opinions. It seems simple to me that if you ask 5 different experts the same question, it's real possible that you're going to get 5 different answers. Now, part of the reason for that is answers tend to be either theories or matter of opinion, or both. And so it depends on your point of reference. What is your perspective as far as the expert is concerned? One guy sees things this way, another guy sees things that way. For instance, for years I answered questions for people about organic growing. Well, organic growing kind of flew in the face of most of the expert opinions in the universities, because through the 20th century, chemicalized agriculture and chemicalized gardening as a product of science was the direction we had gone. Well, now in the 21st century, we've kind of turned and we've gone towards biology, and so we're looking at fungi, bacteria, relationship with plants and other organisms and so on and so forth, and seeing the soil as a living entity. Okay, but that wasn't always the case. And so let's say in 1982 you had asked Bill, what's the best way to grow corn? I'd have probably described a process of using legume cover crops and so on. But if you'd asked the guy at UC Davis, who was in charge of vegetable production, he'd probably have given you a different sort of an answer, because their background, their education, all the financing they get basically comes from major agricultural corporations that produce chemical fertilizers, produce insecticides, and so on. You see, an expert answer really has to do with the point of reference that the expert is coming from. I recall back in my California nursery days, when I used to run a nursery in the Bay Area, that a typical day might have anywhere between 2 and 5 experts on staff within the nursery. So if customers came up and asked Keith a question or asked Ed a question, they could usually get a pretty good answer out of those folks. But occasionally we'd find somebody who didn't understand this, and they'd go around and they'd ask Ed a question. Then they'd turn around and they'd ask Keith the same question. Then they'd go over and they'd ask Laura the same question. Then they'd go and ask Leanne. Then they'd come and they'd ask me. And usually by the time they got to me, they'd often be red in the face and puffing, because they'd have asked 4 different people the same question and got 4 different answers. And this didn't make sense to them. How could that possibly be? Well, the reason why is that plants are not religion. In religion, there's only one answer. Sometimes in mathematics, occasionally, there's only one answer. But when it comes to horticulture, all depends. And so it's a point of perspective. Where is that expert coming from? What is their experience, and so on. Now I get this here on the YouTube channel. It happens a lot. Now the first thing I need to tell everybody out there, that is, I am not a horticultural expert. All right? Not really. I am a horticultural professional. There's a real big difference there. Experts are the kind of guys that usually comb through data, perform experiments, have field trials, observe what's going on, record the information, maybe come up with product lines, hypotenuse theories, different things. These are experts. Experts are more, tend to be more scientific. They also tend to have an awful lot of book learning. Okay, there's a lot of research that comes with being an expert, and ordinarily degrees also. Usually doctorates or masters, me, I, managed a BA, okay, big deal. On the other hand, a guy like myself who's a professional horticulturalist, I sometimes do some trials. I observe things, and I do make analysis, collect a certain amount of data, but you won't usually see me out there with a clipboard and a white lab coat, for instance. That ain't gonna happen. Usually gonna be a pair of Oshkosh bib overalls with mud all over me, and so I can't write down anything. Anyhow, my experience is in the field for decades and decades and decades of pruning plants, looking at soil problems, and so forth. Now, I use the same type of data that a horticultural expert would use when I'm trying to find things out. My favorite places to find information would be UC Davis, for instance. This excellent agricultural college in California has fabulous information as a website on Google. I use the University of Hawaii, again, another fabulous agricultural college. University of Florida, again, another one. Very, very good. And on occasion, when I can't find something in Hawaii or in California, I go to Florida looking for it. On occasion, when I get questions that really are more focused on the northern tier, Canada, and so on, I often use the University of Michigan and the University of New York. These will often also have good answers on apples, pears, sometimes cherry growing, and so on. And so I know where to find information when I need it. And if I don't have an answer, I will usually go look for it. Okay. I don't make one up, let's put it that way. But that's about as far as it goes. The rest of everything else that I believe I know, the vast majority of it was not accumulated in a classroom or a laboratory or out of books. The vast majority of what I know was accumulated by standing in an apple orchard for 40 years and by pruning grapevines for decades and decades. You know, it was learned by standing there and doing. Because of that, so much of the approach that I take and things that I will talk about, they may be unique to me. All right, if you go on to my a video about pruning blackberries, for instance, where I'm using a rope coil system. Now, there are some similar systems out there in the literature, especially the S-curve system where they're weaving. But I do believe that I'm the only guy I've ever seen who promoted a rope coil system. Well, where did I come up with it? I was standing there one day with a cane in my hand and went, geez, I could just loop this thing, you know. And so a lot of things that are done by professional horticulturalists are things that they've learned to do in the field while working over time. And ordinarily they'll prove their worth and the fact that they're valid. Now, they may not at all match the data that comes from a horticultural expert, because they're going to be seeing things from a certain way, you know. And so I would have to say that probably at least 50% of the ways I do things when I'm out working are ways I made up. Okay, I'm a creative person. I like to invent ways of doing things. When I find something that seems easier and it doesn't impact the end product and so on. Well, now the reason I'm really bringing this up at the moment is that every now and then I'll put up a video on the web and I'll get some guy who, instead of coming in and asking a question, because maybe he doesn't understand what I said or it seemed wrong to him or whatever, instead of asking a question, the type of guy I'm talking about usually starts with a statement. Bill, you're wrong. You know, the books say it's this way. Okay. Well, these types of guys, you know, aside from, you know, sometimes maybe having personality problems, because the vast majority of them don't even have their own YouTube channels, they haven't written any books, and so on and so forth. A little bit of information's dangerous. Maybe they took a course in hort, you know, and so on in college. And so most of what they've got came out of a textbook. And when it comes out of a textbook, it can be good stuff. You can generally rely on it, but the textbook is not the only way to do something. Guy jumped down my throat the other day about the way I was summer pruning grapes. He had all kinds of explanations of why I was completely wrong in what I was doing. You know, he pulled it up out of a book and was insisting that I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, to begin with, the guy's clearly a neophyte. You know, not had a long history working with plants, because when you get into this business, you realize that there are as many ways to do something right as there are people who do it. Okay, and I guess if you ever ask me why I do something strange, I can probably explain to you why I don't do it according to the books. I generally have my reasons. Every now and then I don't, and I also goof up on occasion, and so I really appreciate it when I have a senior moment and the viewers get back to me and go, Bill, did you really mean long day onion? I thought you were talking about short day onion. Yeah, they were right. I meant short day onion. What happened? I probably drank too much beer the night before. I don't know what happened there. A real expert will generally address an issue that seems off to them with a question first, attempting to understand what they're seeing, rather than making blanket statements about things, because an expert knows. Every expert's got their own way of seeing it. You may not agree, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Now, again, I'm not talking about the guys that pop up on my channel periodically and go, Bill, you're ugly, or, huh, Bill's fat, or Bill thinks he's smart, that kind of stuff. These are a different kind of character. They're, we call them internet trolls. They're generally, I guess, kind of lonely, sad people who probably would really like to have friends, but have never actually developed the social skills it takes to be able to acquire one. And so instead they're angry and they go look for whatever they can to try to blame things to try to make themselves feel better if they find somebody they can pick on. It's a standard bully thing. The bully is the one who suffers the worst from their bullying, because they never really get to be able to bond with another person and have a decent relationship with other human beings and so on. Anyway, those aren't the people I'm talking about. They just need some love, and it's too bad that there's really nothing I can do for them. My YouTube channel is pretty much about plants, pretty much. And so, if you got a plant problem and you're a bully, hey, check it out, right? But no, I'm talking about the fact that no matter what the issue, when it comes to horticulture, if there's 12 different people that are doing it, it's very possible there's 12 people that know exactly what they're doing, and there's 12 people that are doing it completely different from each other. We have applied a lot of science to horticulture, starting in the 19th century, particularly. Science and horticulture really began to merge. Prior to that time, horticulture was more of a grassroots thing. It was something that you really learned by getting your fingers dirty and by working out there in the garden. There weren't too many books written on the subject, some and so on. Well, we didn't have this vast body of scientific knowledge to back all the horticulture we had. Well, at that time, most people really knew how to grow plants. It wasn't an unusual thing. And the understanding of how to grow plants was really just something that kind of funneled up from the earth, and I think we generally realize that most plants do not require a lot of human intervention to get them to grow. 9 times out of 10, the gardener is the one that messes up the plant. The plant, if it was left alone to its own accords, probably would do fine. Plants are pretty self-sufficient. They've been here a long time before we were here, and so as far as people, it's really just a matter of, did you kind of put it in the right place? It hasn't got feet, and if it likes shade, you best put it in the shade. Does it have enough nitrogen because it's a real heavy feeding plant like an eggplant or corn? This type of thing that the human is responsible for, because the plant cannot come out and say, "You're starving me," or, "My God, it's sunny here, what did you do?" But in general, the plants know exactly what they're doing. They do not really require our help, And I think most people understood this for a long, long time. It got more complicated when science mixed itself with horticulture, and now all of a sudden you got all these chemicals and fertilizers and blah, 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 corporate agriculture that's connected to it, and genetic engineering and all this. So it really has become a science. And the science is, to some extent, to a benefit. But actually, nothing has really changed very much. You know, we've got some better materials, we've got some better ways of dealing with insects. We do understand more about soil and tilth and so on. You know, there is greater understanding today. But in general, plants still grow the same way they've always grown. And how we address the issues with them will really depend so much on the individual person who's working with the plants. And as long as it works for you, then it's probably the right answer. And don't let anybody try to tell you that it's wrong because it doesn't match the book. Again, good part of what I got to say, don't match the books, folks. Yet it will work. Generally, it does work. Yeah. So, that's all I got to say about expert opinions. Aloha, happy gardening. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.